Hi, you're listening to the Diablo podcast. We are online at diablopodcast.com. I am the host, Flux, and I am joined on the show this week by Grug.
Hey.
And by Azzure.
Hello.
Diablo 3 beta patch 13 came out last night, and we've all had a chance to do some playing and have feedback and comments and thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about the skill system and the UI for the skill system, which might be a little bit more of a divisive topic for some. And the every skill I'm shuffling, yeah. And the and some other skill categorization, difficulty of play, chat rooms that are now in Diablo 3, and then we're going to hit a little bit on each character if you guys have got highlights from your playtime thus far. Skill system. We were waiting for months and months. We knew something big was coming. We'd been told that the skills and the runes were going to be changed, and we were going to see runes in the beta. And Azzure, here's the chance for your victory lap of self-congratulation. That will make everyone hate you, even more than they already do because you're Australian. You can tell us you had some pretty good premonitions about this going weeks back.
Yeah, look, basically I had a psychic vision and just wrote down my thoughts on the forums and it was true. Nah, but seriously, I actually the whole prediction was because basically there was a few problems with the way the runes were in general, such as the storage issues and all the other stuff everyone knew about. But there was also a few other problems with like leveling. So you had the dead zone, you had a few of the other things that were lacking, and they're all sort of interrelated. So one day I just thought about it on a sort of developer level, and came up with, hang on, what if, it would make a lot more sense if they just removed them as items, because rune ranks no longer really matter, because rune ranks were designed when there were still skill points. So it kind of it all just melded together. It just made a lot of sense to actually remove them as items and to have them become part of the leveling curve, because leveling, as you know, from level 30 to 60 became pretty much pointless. Like there was absolutely no reward from going from 30 to 60, and that didn't feel right. And then you had those storage issues, which you really could not avoid. No matter what they tried, they could not avoid having that storage problem with runes.
Can you elaborate on that for people who might not have thought about it? Why would there have been a storage problem?
Well, if every rune attuned, and even if they didn't attune, so even if we had the colored system with just alabaster and all that stuff, there's still a lot of runes you have to store in your stash, and when you want to move them between characters and move them between skills and things like that, it just added a pretty elaborate storage requirement. You'd have to, twist and turn everything and take them out of certain spells, put them in other ones, and it just didn't. It would have been a management nightmare in terms of inventory. So there was, and then the attunement system just made that 10 times worse, which means that you have to for every spell has its own rune that's tied to that spell. So you had five runes per spell. You've got about 20 to 25 spells per class. You do the math, and there is literally just not enough storage in the game to justify that.
I do imagine that inventory might have been an issue under Blizzard's the more recent version of the runes. I don't know if everyone listening knows what happened. It started as, the 5 runes, which was Crimson, Indigo, Golden, Alabaster, Obsidian, and then, which were originally general, and then Blizzard changed it so that, blank runes could be placed into a skill and they would work for only that skill, and they would turn to a random color. They said themselves that once they got over the idea of having runes as physical items and dropping, they managed to streamline it, turn it into the system that we have now.
We saw the Jay Wilson post where he explained the whole system and the changes. Mm-hmm. And so what do you guys think of the new system in the general concept of it, where, you get the skills still come on, between level 1 through 30, and then every 6 or 8 levels after a skill is available, you get a new rune effect in it. And you can change it and modify it, and these are always better than the base skill.
I like it because I came up with a theory, which means that I think it made sense to begin with. But
your theory was largely about overcoming the difficulties of having your entire inventory full of runes. So that doesn't mean you necessarily like this system especially. Well, this avoids some of the problems with the other system at least.
Well, in my theory, I also said that they would defer all those into the actual leveling system. So when you level up, you get rune effects one by one and all that sort of stuff. So it was very similar to what I thought would be a good way of handling it. But one of the really good things, I actually like the system for a few reasons. One of them, it forces experimentation because all the runes and skills are strategically placed. So for example, every time you level up, and you got to remember later on, there's going to be a long period between levels. So it's not like going to be where it is now where you gain, 5 levels per session or whatever. It's going to be more like you'll probably spend a good few hours from level, say, 35 to 36. Now, in that playtime, you'll probably, whenever you ding to, say, 36 and you get all these new rune effects, the first thing you probably want to do is actually check them out. Now, with the drop system, you didn't have that opportunity. You got it was all luck-based. So if you got a rune, you would put it into a random spell, and you might get 10 of the same rune if you're unlucky. And it didn't really have that pacing mechanic that this one does. So you would always, no one will ever see all the rune abilities in that old system, but now they will. And you get a chance to play with them. So you probably spend at least half of the time, leveling from, say, 36 to 37 using that new rune effect. And that's a pretty good way of introducing the player to that system, to that rune, and making them have an easier time choosing what they like and what build they're going to go with. So with the pacing side of it, I think it's brilliant.
What do you think, Grug?
I agree with mostly what Azzure says. I am worried about sort of how it now affects the overall character progression, rather than being, specializations of your preferred skill. They are essentially just you get new skills every level that are very similar to your previous skills. There's also the fact that, you might want a specific effect, say, of magic missile, like the homing one, that you might not be able to get until something like level 40, level 50, way late in the game. I'm worried that it sort of removed that option that the older system had.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, before you could have tried out basically every modifier in, say, Magic Missile by like level 15.
Mm.
You would have had level 1 runes of everything, and you could have seen what you liked best and then kind of use that forever. Whereas this way you'll have to wait till level 30 or 40 or 50 for some of these skills before you finally get the runestone for it that you would have had at latest at like 30 or 31 previously.
Yeah, and in addition, there's no longer a rank system. All the rune variants that you get are frozen as a specific rank, such as Magic Missile, the split one will always fire 3 missiles, and the player also loses that progression in this new system.
What Greg said is true about the progression, because my theory, which was the wrong part of my theory, was that they would maintain that progression with runes. My theory was they might have some kind of consumable item that levels up your rune effects, so basically replacing the ranks, just doing it over time. And they have actually stripped that completely out of the game. That part of it, I'm a bit, that's probably the worst part of the new system. Once you're level 60, there is no more customization or no more room to progress apart from items. So items are now the only thing that, I guess, differentiates your character from anybody else.
The thing I'm wondering about is the long term, like you guys just said. I mean, this is really fun in the beta now because it gives us something new to play with, and there's new skills, and there's new varieties of the skills. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's a novelty. I mean, I played more last night than I'd played like the last 3 patches put together.
Yep.
Because I just seen all the skills and nothing was changing in the gameplay except for, hit points on monsters or whatever. And now it's like, hey, there's, I played the wizard first, and of course there's 2 completely new skills available, and then you've got multiple rune versions of, Arcane Orb has a really cool one, and then there's 2 from Magic Missile, etc. Mm-hmm. But, that's great at level 13 because we're bored with the beta. How is that going to matter when we're level 25 or 30, like you guys were just saying?
Yeah.
Are we going to regret this long term?
Without a progression system, certainly, I think.
It seems like Blizzard has been slowly sort of stripping away all the real, more meaningful customization aspects. Now at level 60, all we're going to get is gear. We used to have the talisman system. We used to have traits, which were sadly short-lived, and I thought they were totally awesome.
And skill points and rune points.
Skill points. Actually, it wasn't too sad when they removed skill points, just because it sort of made sense, A, from a balance perspective, and also some skills didn't make sense to put extra points in, like teleport. Oh, and it also doesn't help that maybe it's just because we've just been limited to, Act 1 items, but the items in Diablo 3 are much less interesting than they are in Diablo 2. For instance, Diablo 2, you had stuff like 15% chance to cast Nova when hit. Lifesteal was more common, open wounds, prevent monster regeneration, that kind of thing. And Blizzard has the opportunity to add a lot more of those nice affixes, but they haven't done that, so...
I totally agree with that. And in Diablo 2, the itemization actually defined your character a lot more than Diablo 3 certainly does. And that's a part that will, I think, hurt Diablo 3 in the long run if they don't actually start implementing better and more unique affixes. And I think I've said it so many times now. I think the item system.
Say it again anyway.
I think the item system. Well, it's hard to say this because we don't know we know they're not done with them, so we can't exactly blame them yet. But I think that the item system at the moment is so bland and generic, even with all these newer affixes. I think if you remember my post where I compared those 4 crossbows, I'm still having that even with the rare items which have more affixes, that you just look at them and you can't see that, there's no clear distinction on which item is, not only which one's better, but which one changes your character in a certain way. There's none of that. It just feels so generic and homogenized. Like everything just adds a bit of power, like overall power to your character. There's nothing that actually defines you too much yet. And I think a lot of that is because of the fact that all the stats are so equally balanced for everybody, and they're so equally balanced against each other. The affixes are just very, very dull. There's no awesome affixes versus not so awesome affixes, for example.
But I kind of miss, having attack, precision, defense, and vitality, sort of artificially creating that dichotomy between strength, dexterity, and intelligence. Just makes it feel even more generic, like, oh, this has strength on it, it must be a barbarian item, or, oh, this is dexterity, my wizard won't need it at all.
Much as I hate to disagree with Azzure Tradamus here about anything, I've made the same argument against that point, or at least not really against it, but sort of adding to your long-term itemization. It's just we know so little about the long-term item stats.
Yeah.
And especially what kind of quantities of modifiers we will have at level 60. Now it doesn't make much difference if you add 10 strength versus 10 dex or whatever. But if you're adding 500 strength versus 500 dex at level 60, and you're doing that on 8 different items, I think that'll make a massive difference, cumulatively.
That's why I hesitate to say it, because we haven't
No, you
seen
don't. You
any...
say it constantly.
I know, but I still say it with a disclaimer at the beginning saying, the item system is not ready. I kind of sound like Blizzard now. But, I don't want to make any conclusive arguments yet. I just want to say that at the moment, it's a concern for me. It's something that I'm closely monitoring.
There's also the issue of, like what Flux you just described, having plus 500 strength, is that those stats, they're just numbers. You're still, using the same skills in the same way. It's just you're doing them more effectively. Blizzard has sort of stripped out the more, I guess, unique affixes that offer a little more strategy in how you play your character. There is one thing that I considered, though. I was reading through the Witch Doctor skills, and apparently one of his passives actually gets affected by plus health globe pickup radius. I got to thinking, what if more skills, got affected in that way by items? There was a stat on items that would increase, like, damage over time duration, or, area of effect, or defense penalties, that kind of thing.
One other thing that Azzure has mentioned about items is you've pointed out that the plus damage is very low, very minimal on high-end stuff, like Windforce. Obviously, they're not finished yet, as we almost always disclaimer this topic, but it was like 30% was like, elite legendary equipment was like 30% damage, whereas you could get, 18% on a regular item.
Yep.
And you think that's unpleasant because, you looked at top items in Diablo 2 and they would have 300, 400% damage. But on the other hand, that was such a limiting factor for an item. 90% of the items, even the really good stuff, was completely useless if it would have had 50% less damage. It was like, okay, never use this. No other stats could make up for that. Whereas it seems like in D3 they're making the damage much flatter on the the spikes of the damage EKG are much lower in their range, which will give more items in-game viability based on other stats.
That was an argument I made a long time ago, I think it was before beta even. It was when they released the preview of the legendary items, which were completely randomized. A lot of people didn't realize this, but those items were literally like created from a spreadsheet and just randomly generated. So nothing was actually they weren't even slightly developed. So that was a big blunder by Blizzard. That's why they took them down. It was very silly of them to publish it in the first place. But look, in terms of the underlying issue of certain affixes that are required, like you said in D2, if a weapon didn't have enhanced damage, it was rubbish. You couldn't, no matter how good its stats were, you could not unless you're a Javazon or something which doesn't use weapon damage. But the point stands that the damage was just so important. That damage affix had to be there and it had to be high. I agree with you that that's probably a little bit of a bad thing. But on the other hand, going too much in the other direction is also a bad thing, because you want to have a very small percentage of weapons being a very high percentage better than others. And I'm talking, those mega rare items. Now, if you go too much in the other direction and say, all items are very, very similar in damage, then it's not really fun to go from, my example back then was a white item, which is, now trash. You're not even supposed to pick them up. For Windforce to only be 30% better than that in damage really sucked, because that meant that if there was a magical version of this, it would be about the same as Windforce damage-wise, and that sucked. So too much in that direction is worse, I think, than the problem we had in D2. But I also agree with you that it is a problem in D2 that weapon damage, enhanced damage, was basically something you had to have on weapons. So I think something in between that would be good. And it looks like they are moving in that direction. If you look at some of the elemental damage they're starting to add, and some of the affixes that add damage in different ways, that is pretty cool. And I take back what I said before, because the legendary items is basically what I had the biggest complaint about. We have never actually seen one, really. The ones that were on the website were completely randomized. So when I wrote that article, it was based on that information of not knowing that it was randomized. It was based on the information we had in front of us, which was wrong, because Blizzard shouldn't have released it, which they've now taken down.
Part of Diablo's appeal is getting that super rare item with the unbelievable stats on it, and if there's no chance of that, getting something unbelievable, a lot of the spark and the drive of the game is kind of gone.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so getting back to the skills, the new skill system briefly. We talked about the concept. How about the execution? I wrote a first impressions that was about 9,000 times longer than it needed to be last night, this morning actually, but I closed it by talking about the interface of the new skill system, and listing a number of things that I was not entirely pleased with. And I read there's 50 some odd comments I read earlier, and not one person said you're wrong, it's great.
Oh,
so have you guys tried it, and what do you think?
Well,
yeah, I feel like I'm losing my touch. Actually, I was a little disappointed.
It's not just you. Even the people on the official Blizzard forum. There's currently a 25-page thread of people agreeing that the current UI implementation of the skill system is terrible.
Have they all been banned yet?
No, actually.
It's a weekend. Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, Blizzard has changed it so that skills are now assigned to not just having the first slot, the second slot, the third slot, but specific buttons on your keyboard, and they are unlocked in a certain order. For example, you start off with your left mouse skill. That's called the primary slot. Then there's a secondary slot on your right mouse button.
Primary slot is always, some kind of click kill thing.
I'm getting to that, yeah. There's primary, secondary, there's defensive, which is on the one key, and then every class has a different category on 2, 3, and 4. For instance, the monk has conviction, then techniques, and focus. And Blizzard has, as of this patch, they've implemented a system whereas by default, you can only assign certain skills to certain slots, which has a lot of people sort of in an uproar at the moment. I mean, they do offer elective mode where you can assign any skill to any slot, but for some reason they decided to bury that in the options menu, and it doesn't even save if you quit the game and come back.
Well, we've had 4 months of Battle.net, of Diablo 3 beta not saving my password or username when I log in, so I'm kind of used to having to re-enter things every new game. I'm hoping that'll not be the case in the final product.
Even if you do have elective mode on, switching skills the UI is pretty terrible about that. All the 20 or so skills are divided into 6 different pages, so you can't see all your skills at once. You can only view one skill at a time. You click on a skill, you can view all the potential rune effects, and on one level you unlock that, but you can only view one at a time. It's generally just a mess.
And you can only see those once you're high enough level to use the skill and then to get the runes either.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one map that just shows a diagram of all the skill icons. It seems like they should just have a link, diablowiki.net for actual information at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they'll probably won't implement that in the final game, but it will be helpful.
Yeah.
And one of the other really annoying things is I always find myself, when you've got a skill slot, you want to run through and see what you can fill that skill slot with. And with this tabulated structure they've got, where it's or you cycle through those categories, two things. One, you can't even, so if you're just cycling and comparing runes, for example, you can't even select another skill that you've already got on another bar just to see the runes. You have to close that window and open a new one to where it's actually assigned to check it, because if you click on it, nothing happens. And that's just one example of how frustrating it is when you're just trying to see what's available and you can't do that.
Do we think they just threw this together like the last 3 days? Did they actually test this out and think it was really good? Now they're surprised that people don't like how it works.
I don't think they're surprised. I think they, just the way they iterate on things, it probably is still internally, they probably have something totally different, to be honest. Like, they may have fixed all these issues. It's not the first time it's happened. But that doesn't mean that people should, just assume that, like, everyone should be complaining, because if they don't and they haven't changed it, then they need to know that it's very, very frustrating and unpopular. But I think, it would be safe to say that they probably are aware of these problems, and internally, people have probably said similar things to them, to other developers in the company, because they do company-wide testing and things like that.
Part of me wants to say that they just sort of hacked this UI and functionality together to get it out the door for patch 13, but then I realize it's Blizzard we're talking about, and that's totally not their strategy.
With elective mode, I think they should just change it to have everything similar to what they had in patch 10. So if you click on elective mode, it reverts it back to that sort of everything in the same window, and they should just integrate that with the hotbar. So instead of having in the old system, how you had skill 1, skill 2 up to 6, they should just change it to have left mouse, right mouse, 1, 2, 3, 4 in that order. So just imagine the patch 10 skill UI, have that same UI there, but just have it so when you pick those spells, it goes into the quickbar slot that you've selected. That would be a much better elective mode in my eyes.
Well, if they did that, then what if you wanted to move a skill you currently have from one button to another? You would probably wind up incurring the 15-second cooldown.
Yeah, they would need to put an accept thing as well, of course. So, they'll have to change the OK button with the accept and cancel button.
Yeah, I spent a lot more than 15 seconds shuffling skills around last night, trying to get around this stupid system.
Yeah.
I tried to describe it in the written report and did a horrible job, and I'm sure I'll mangle it verbally as well. But at level 4 with a Demon Hunter, you have 4 skills, and one of them is Caltrops, which you cannot put to your left mouse click. And I had the other 3 assigned, and I wanted to move the right click to the 1 key.
Yeah.
But you can't just unselect the right click and have that not be a skill.
Yeah.
You have to replace it with something,
and
then you can't have the same skill on 2 hotkeys at the same time.
Yep.
So you have to literally switch left to right and right to 1 and 1 to left and left to right. You have to move it.
It's like the Tower of Hanoi.
Yeah, and then you can't. And then I couldn't use Caltrop because it wouldn't go on my left. I had it all set up to work, and I need to put Caltrops on the left so then I could take rapid fire off entirely or whatever. And I couldn't do it. I'm like, oh god, no, I'm screwed. I literally spent 2 minutes trying to shift my skills around, and finally just said, screw it. I'll just right click for rapid fire instead of 1 for rapid fire.
You know what's even worse? You actually have as you unlock your first skill, your second skill, your third skill, you also unlock the button that they're attached to. So, for example, I have the Diablo 3 multi-button mouse, and the button that activates number 1 is in a really uncomfortable position. I'd much prefer to use the button that activates number 2, but I can't do that until I get to level, what is it, 9 now?
No luck for you.
That's so pathetic. You have to remap the keys yourself, which is annoying because the menus change every time you restart the game. So
you know what really sucks about this mouse? I just want to go on a tangent for a sec. Used to be I could bind stuff to middle mouse click. I can't do that anymore. And also mouse up and mouse scroll up and mouse scroll down, and I can't do that anymore.
Well, that was Diablo 2. You could just cycle through all your skills.
No, I mean in Diablo 3 beta around, I think it was patch 10, I could literally just scroll up and shoot an arcane orb.
Yeah, that got removed in one of the patches. I don't know why.
It's terrible.
Okay, so now that we've all shared our joy for this system...
I've got one more thing to say about that system.
Oh, well,
one more, quick one.
By all means. I'm sure no one stopped listening by now.
What I noticed is if you look at the feedback forums, now, as you know, the feedback forums, especially after the 100,000 people were invited, it's pretty noob. Most of the threads there are pretty, they're enough to laugh at something. Some people just have no idea. Have never played a game. It's some of the stuff's ridiculous. But
it's like the Diablo 3 friends and family test.
Yeah,
pretty much on a much worse scale, unfortunately. But the interesting thing was, and I monitored this closely because I thought this was what's going to happen. People are actually posting that why are you guys not allowing us to choose where we want to put the skills? Now, as you know, that's what elective mode does. But we've got all these, so these are the players who this system's targeted to assist, who makes it easier for these people. Here they are going on the forums, posting, saying, how come we can't, please allow us to change it, not knowing that there is an elective mode. And to me, that's the ultimate, contradiction. They're trying to make it accessible,
very ironic,
yet
yes.
It's becoming very, very difficult for these new players to understand. And it's no wonder. I mean, it's quite messy. If you actually sit down and look at it, the system is quite messy. And the system they had before that is much simpler. And I found that to be a little bit funny. And yeah.
I was going to bring that up. It was the whole, it's meant to be casual friendly. Okay, and I was thinking, what is this actually designed for? And I can kind of see the point of, here's your attack skills, here's your support skills, here's your escape skills, whatever. That's kind of useful for noobs who don't know which skills to put where and feel overwhelmed, etc. But then the execution of it, is it actually working? And you seem to be saying not so much through the way the UI functions.
No, that's right. So the idea is good, and that's what I said earlier in this podcast, that the idea itself is quite smart because it's basically saying that, okay, this spell is a generator, therefore it's very, very good to be put on the left mouse button. So they're basically trying to force casual players into not making mistakes in selecting, basically making it hard on themselves by selecting the wrong skill in the wrong slot. So that fixes that. But the problem is the way they went about implementing it makes people quite confused because the UI is very, very tricky to get around. And that part of it, I think, like you said, the execution of it was not so good. And it'll probably get iterated on, but it still doesn't mean that we shouldn't, be vocal about this problem because, last thing we want to do is no one says anything and it goes into retail. Causes a lot of issues.
The real unfortunate thing is that really the simplest solution would be to take the elective mode checkbox from, being buried deep in the options menu to actually being on the skill UI itself.
The skill UI. That's a good idea, yeah.
So people can just well, I don't really like this. Oh, elective mode? Let's try this. Oh, that's so much better. I like this game now.
Okay, one last thing on the skill thing before we move on to different topics. The categorization of the skills.
Yes, I was...
And one of the things that they mentioned in advance when they were plugging skill runes for the last 4.5 years is how cool it was that they changed the function of some skills. And sometimes you had defensive skills that gained an attack, and sometimes you had offensive skills that became, a defense or a debuff or something.
Oh yeah.
And that seemed like a really cool concept. And I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, sadly, but there were a number of ones they demonstrated in BlizzCon videos and such. And then now they have these skills, in these rigid categorizations where you can only put this on the to button and it's, only a debuff or whatever. I haven't gone and checked, but I mean, how are they going to remove these? Are they going to change around some of the skill rune functions to make them only be defensive, or is there going to be this skill that's totally inappropriate for the button?
I sincerely hope not. And I think fortunately Blizzard will also not change them because it would involve that much more work with implementing the new functionality and the UI and how it looks.
I was looking at stuff like doing a melee DH Demon Hunter build, and without runes you can't do it. It's those runes that add slowing effects and do all sorts of defensive things on your attacks. That's what made those builds possible, and it would be the absolute worst thing they could do to remove that. It's probably one of the best
they
things
remove
about
basic attack.
Yeah, I don't mind about that.
But how can you?
Oh, with the melee DH. Yeah. Well, the melee DH doesn't actually. When I say melee, he actually equips melee weapons, but he doesn't really swing them. So he has a lot of, Fan of Knives. There's a rune that turns that into when you get hit, it does a huge area of effect damage.
Right.
And you basically recast it over. So there's a lot of stuff that you can tailor make into your build to make you very. You don't need a crossbow, or you don't need any kind of ranged weapon, and they're actually very, very viable.
Moving on to some basic gameplay stuff from the new patch. To me, it seemed like the difficulty and the play speed and the overall flow were kind of better in some way. I mean, there's a lot of intangibles that go into that. The last couple of builds, they got this in the last beta patch. They added tons and tons of hit points to characters, and we talked about that on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I thought it felt a little fake. They added a lot of hit points to the monsters as well, and it sort of felt like this Fisher-Price world where you were using plastic weapons and you had body armor on.
I totally agree.
I was playing almost always untwinked characters because it gets way too easy otherwise. But I always kind of felt like I was playing Diablo 2 where I'd twinked really good equipment but no weapon. So it's like nothing can hurt me and I can't really kill them, but we're just like we're kind of in sumo suits bouncing off each other for a while.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got less of that feeling in this patch, although I couldn't exactly say why, and I might have just been caught up in the joy of having new spells to play with.
Yeah,
What do you guys think?
It's definitely monsters do it more difficult. Full stop. So I totally agree with you. And I know the sumo effect you were talking about. I experienced that as well, and it was a big concern for me because I would rather them have monsters hit harder and die quicker than be these giant, World of Warcraft style monsters that take, a minute of pounding on to kill. That would absolutely suck. So I was very glad to see it sort of vary back to closer to what it was before, which is they can be dangerous if you really screw up. And they do die quite quickly when you do get, if you craft a weapon, you'll start killing stuff very quickly. I do like where they've hit it now is perfect for me.
Yeah, I've also I haven't had quite as much experience with it as you guys because besides sleeping last night, sorry Flux, I
You're still young too. Why are you wasting time sleeping?
you'd be surprised.
Plenty of time for sleep in the ground.
Yeah, also had some connection issues which were weird. I need to fix that. But I did notice that yes, enemies do seem a little tougher. I'm sure if we went back and looked at some old fan videos, we could compare the exact, damage numbers and health bars. But it did seem like I think the first time I noticed it is when all the zombies started appearing outside the old Tristram Gate, and previously there was like 9. This time I think there were about 25.
It's hard to say what exactly was different. I mean, you got larger packs and they had a few more hit points, but just sort of the flow felt better. But the one I really did notice the difference were the skeletal summoners.
Yes,
where they seemed like they were spawning with like 10 skeletons to begin with, and they were hella pumping them out.
Yeah.
I had a couple of times where I got a two-pack of those next to one of those paintings that comes to life. And I had to retreat like 2 rooms early on with my wizard because I was just constantly out of arcane, pounding away on them with my arcane orb. But it was really fun. They were really spawning quickly.
It was really cool.
I mean, it wasn't dangerous, but it was fun.
I think the same thing happened to the Wretched Queens. I recall when I got into the Weeping Hollow, I found a Wretched Queen rare with teleport. As a wizard, it actually teleported right in front of me, vomited, and suddenly there were 10 zombies around me. I think I noticed they actually started shooting faster too.
The first time I died in the bed, and I died once, which is very, very
wow.
rare.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Basically, it was a skeletal pack. It wasn't the actual skeletal summoners. It was those bones that just spawn monsters, the 4 bones in the ground. It's in the cathedral.
The skeletal banners. Yeah.
Yeah, the banners. I actually wiped on that because there were so many, and I positioned myself, quite silly. I couldn't actually, because I was a demon hunter, I couldn't actually target them because there were monsters all around them. So anytime I'll do my high damage attack, such as impale, so I'm trying to impale them, and he'll just hit a skeleton instead of hitting the banner. And fast forward it took me about 5 minutes to clear that encounter, and that was good. That was a good change of pace. It means that you have to be strategic. See, if I went in there and quickly killed those banners, I wouldn't have had a problem.
Did you notice the gold, Azzure? That's your whole econ area.
There was a patch note saying that the gold drops were increased. Now, what that meant, and I obviously didn't know this before the patch came out, but the actual amounts didn't increase. What happens now is more monsters drop more gold. So they actually, if you do look around, they actually made the gold drops a bit more static in terms of how much quantity in each pile. See, before you used to sometimes get like 18 gold, 1 gold, 5 gold, and all that stuff. It actually went up quite statically. You got 5, 6, stuff like that. But there was a lot more of it dropping.
Any other general commentary before we talk about specific character classes?
Economy-wise, not really.
Oh, I forgot chat rooms. Did you guys try the chat rooms, and were you appalled?
Oh, God.
The chat channel, I guess. Calling it a room is a little overstated.
Do you really want me to answer that question?
You're a big fan of the StarCraft 2 chat channels, I know.
For all 3 people who use them. Look, the chat rooms, at least they've put them in, but they have a long way to go. And when I say long way to go, it doesn't really mean that they necessarily need to be overhauled or anything like that. In fact, there's only maybe 3 changes they need to make, and they're very easy changes that would make it perfect. Number 1,
IRC.com. Would that help?
Well, Battle.net 1.0 is pretty much, hit it on the head back then. Look, first thing is, the actual window needs to be placed in the center, and it needs to be bigger. I mean, that's quite an easy one to do.
Or at least draggable.
Or draggable, yeah.
Sizable.
Secondly, I don't know why they chose to hide the user list by default, I mean, you can turn it on through the settings, but I don't know why anyone would not want to turn that on.
Probably so I would not mention it in my quick post about chat channels. People in comments could then say, "You idiot, you forgot to mention this." I think that's why they did it actually.
um, that would be, that's a small thing. So now the actual people themselves. So what represents a player right now is just text. It's their name. Why don't they make them avatars with the 3D models? They've already done it in Battle.net. So if you inspect somebody, or even in the old system, you could check all their characters, and it has miniature versions of their characters, 3D model representations. They need to put that functionality back in, similar to how Diablo 2 did it, where you had the bottom of the screen had people and had their names and their avatar there. They need to do that as well.
I suppose the problem with that is that you're logged on as your Battle.net ID rather than a specific character.
Yeah, but if you notice when you change character, it actually gets out of that screen altogether. So they could, I guess, put it on whatever character you selected, because that's the chat room screen is where your character's already been selected. Now, the thing I don't understand is that their reason for their dislike for chat rooms is that chat rooms can create, there's a lot of spam bots and advertising and all that sort of stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you say got a part-time GM or assigned one of the existing GMs to monitor the chat rooms for 1 hour a day, right? They could ban 100 bots, right, in 1 hour easily, right? So this guy's just trekking the public channels, sees an advertisement, instant ban, the account's gone. That's $60.
He'd pay for himself quite quickly.
He more than pays for himself if he bans, and we in an hour, banning's not exactly, it takes literally 2 clicks to do for them. They could generate so much revenue doing it this way that they would actually make a massive profit doing it. So I don't understand why they would use that as an argument against chat channels. Everyone wants them. Everyone hates spam bots. The simple solution is to make a lot of money out of it and give the players what they want, and no one loses. It's a win-win situation. The only people who lose are the spam bots, which is great.
Well,
So
what would Activision Blizzard do with all that profit they were making? Any idea?
Bobby Golden Boots.
There you go.
I think that does sound like a very nice dream, but unfortunately, the reality is that most of the accounts that do spam, not on the original Diablo 2, but on World of Warcraft, which is, I guess, the most comparable, these spammers do not buy their own accounts to spam with. They're usually stolen accounts, and there would be quite a lot more involved with getting rid of them than just ban. Because, what if someone wants their account back? It's not like you have a rifle and you're shooting targets. Like, there's a spammer, blam! There's a spammer, blam! You have to think about. You have to be.
Well,
a
actually, it is just like that.
well,
I mean, yes, just like in real life, it's that easy to shoot something, but you have to worry about the consequences afterwards.
Well, there are many there are many aspects to that. Firstly, if someone does hack an account, you've got the real money auction house, which is a far bigger problem than getting banned. You could be out of pocket potentially. So, look, I think from what I saw, someone reported that it looks like that they're tying the authenticator to accounts, which increases your real money auction house limit. So if you have an authenticator, you can basically, have more money in your Battle.net balance and stuff like that. There's a few aspects of that. Basically, what I'm saying is if we're going to start assuming that no one can do wrong because they might have been hacked at the time, there are actually easy methods for Blizzard to determine if an account has been compromised. You can see what IP is coming. 99.9% of accounts that are hacked is from China. The players who do hack it are from China or India or some kind of non-regional US country. Now that's an easy sort of at a glance you can see if that's if something's happening there. The registered account's US, yet you've got a Chinese IP, spamming the hell out of it. So there's that, and then there's the other fact that if you're going to go that far to be a deterrent for chat channels, and what about all the other issues that come with account hacking? The real money auction house is obviously the biggest one. So that problem is a different problem, is what I'm getting at. It's more of a there's a lot worse that could happen with the introduction of the real money auction house from a compromised account. You do raise a good point in that people, some people do fall victim to getting hacked and they may lose, their entire account because someone's spam botting it. But it's quite easy to determine whether that was them or whether that was a Chinese spammer, which,
It's not the hackers that are buying the accounts. Sorry, Bobby.
Posted a video on the site of the Demon Hunter Azzure. And you play anybody else? I have some Demon Hunter questions for you in a minute, but was it your main focus?
Yeah, I've got him to level 11 at the moment. But yeah, no, that's pretty much what all I've played. I made a monk, but I stopped playing him after level 2 because I couldn't be bothered.
Well, nice for you to test thoroughly on all the new features.
Demon Hunters.
That's why you're a frequent podcast guest.
Lazy.
So I played a bunch of Wizard and it was awesome, and I put a bunch of that in my report. Do you guys have any sparkling Wizard questions, or should we just move on?
Did it feel, I guess, did the runes really change it up that much for you?
The biggest change is the regen rate. I mentioned that in the article.
Yeah.
I mentioned it to you last night on Battle.net.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be, I think it was
12,
12.5 per second.
Now it's 10.
And now it's 10 per second, which doesn't sound like a great deal, but
20%.
it really, I was really noticing it. I mean, especially because your first skill is Magic Missile, which is free because it's a signature skill, but then you get Arcane Orb for your second skill.
Yeah.
And you put it on your right click because that's the only option you have because I hate you so much.
Yeah.
And that's 35 a pop. So, your total pool is 100 and this skill's 35. So, pretty obviously you're out of mana.
Remember,
or whatever the hell it's called now.
Remember when
Arcane
everyone
Power.
was complaining about too much Arcane Power? Well, that's
and then later
gone
on, now they've got Frost, Ray of Frost, which works like Disintegrate, except it doesn't penetrate and it chills.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super. God, I keep wanting to say Mana Drain, super Arcane Power Drain.
Mm.
And then the other new one is Arcane Torrent, which is totally awesome and fun to use, and it also drains it, by the second as you cast it. So you start using those, which are fun and new and exciting, and I wanted to play with them, and it's like you just have zero. I mean, you're lucky you have, Spectral Strike and Magic Missile and stuff, and Charged Bolt you can use constantly, which is now called Shock Pulse, as I keep forgetting. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's really, I mean, I mentioned some of the...
Well, at least signature skills now feel more important to you.
True.
Yeah, the first Magic Missile rune is just like it goes from like 110 to 143% damage, and it adds a little yellow sparkle to it. So, I mean, but it's exactly the same skill. I mean, it changes nothing in the function. But then at level 13, you get the split, which used to be Indigo rune, and now it shoots 3 balls out, and that was so much more fun. Even though each ball it's 50% versus 143% for one, so you're thinking, okay, it's almost I have to hit all 3 to make a profit. Mm-hmm. But you have a much higher chance of getting critical hits, obviously, when you're hitting 3 times instead of 1. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like it was really stunning the monsters. Like, they would get hit by 2 or 3, and it would stand them up. Because, like, one of them would critical almost every time, and that would give me a little brief stun. Mm-hmm. So, and plus, it's just more fun. So, I mean, that was more fun. The first rune for Shock Pulse, which used to be Charge Bolt, makes, like, if a monster dies from it, they explode in this little sort of, like, not really a nova, but it's kind of like a little dome shape. That's a 10-yard shape. Yeah. And that's awesome. It just looks so cool. It's a total barbarian visual, where everything that explodes goes flying like 50 feet. Yeah. They're shooting straight up in the air. The funnest part I had of that was doing it on that little peninsula that you use to amulet hunt right before you get to the Skeleton King. That one little corner there. Yeah. Mm. And like every single skeleton went flying off to the sides in some weird angle, like bouncing off the walls right over that big. Oh, it was so cool. Yeah. I just did one charge bolt and like 4 explosions went up, and it was like just bodies were just sailing.
You just reminded me about the crit rate. Actually, it's now like 30%. Did you notice that?
It's higher than it used to be. Yeah, I think
way
it was like 5%.
Yeah, I used to. Yeah, like you wouldn't get more than like 4 or 5% before. Now, I was like level 6, and it was 30%. So I was wondering why I kept seeing yellow numbers flying up. And then I had a look at my crit rate, and it was 30%, which is much, much higher than it's ever been in any point of the beta, no matter what items I was wearing. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, crit gives you special effects, it freezes and stuns and sets them on fire and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
that's good.
So I don't know if maybe every character. I mean, I haven't played anybody else to more than level 7, and I played the wizard to 13, so I got a whole bunch of new options. Plus, there's 2 whole new skills for the wizard, because they've reshuffled all where the seed level requirements. So it was super fun, and they were super cool skills, and all the runes looked really nice and improvements. The first, you get 1 rune for Arcane Orb, which takes the radius from 10 to 20 yards, which I was going to say that doubles it, but of course that wouldn't be mathematically accurate. It's what? It's much higher than because it's 20 yards in every direction, obviously. So it's,
well, if you're talking arrow.
It's basically like you're shooting a ball that creates a wave of force almost.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. It's just empty the screen with that. Mm-hmm. I had one part where I got a huge pack of skeletons, and I killed 18 skeletons with 1 shot, which just gives you an idea of how much the radius is of it. I mean, you don't usually get 18 monsters in one little spot, but so I haven't. Obviously we need to. You got your Demon Hunter pretty high. You really enjoyed the runes on the piercing. What the hell is it called? Hungering Arrows.
Before we move on, I had another question for you, Flux. What order, what loadout did you have as you progressed? Did you like switch immediately to the new magic missile? Did you try shock pulse out at any time? Like, how did you pick your skills as you were leveling up?
Well, I've played a lot of Wizard, so I pretty much know what all the skills do, and I wanted to try the new stuff as well. But I mean, generally, Arcane Orb has been my favorite skill in recent builds because it gives you such a big splash early on,
Mm.
and now you get a level 2, so it's like you
Hmm.
can't help but use it.
Mm.
And they've also changed Frost Nova, so it only stuns now. It does 0 damage.
Hmm.
So you get that at 4, and it's a nice defense, but you don't really need the defense very much. So I was untwinked, as my first character, so I was just completely doing stuff as I went,
Hmm.
and mostly sticking to stuff that worked really well. And once I did a full run through, then I started getting, I was level 8 or 9, and then you start getting new skills. Arcane Torrent I think was a 9 or a 10, and then you get the rune effects come in. You get one at 6, and then you get like one at 8, and then you get another one at 9, 11, and 13 or something. So I just really ended up experimenting. I did like 3 runs after I'd finished it all, and just tried every skill out.
Yeah.
And it took me, for one, the shock pulse took me a while to grow on me because it seems like it goes a little wider spread now. It's really hard to hit anything with more than one of those bolts.
Mm.
And I'm not sure how useful that would be at your level. I mean, it's easy when you're level 11, you kill anything with one shot, but
Yeah.
it looks really awesome, and the explosions of it are fun, and it's really effective. But you need a big pack because you want, obviously, the explosions are AoE. And you just want to shoot it into like 50 monsters and watch them all die very quickly. I mean, it's like a secret cow level spell, basically.
And that brings a good point because I also noticed because the first rune you get in as the demon hunter is the what's that thing called? Piercing arrow thing, hungering arrow. That's it. And when you use it, the graphic of it is so much better and makes it feel so much better. And I don't know if it's just the graphic or they make it move faster, like the projectile itself moves faster or whatever, but it just feels so much better than the base hungering arrow. And so what that sort of hints to me is that I think a lot of the base skill effects, because they knew that runes, everyone's going to have a rune, so the graphics always going to be different than the base skill. It's almost like they designed they put more emphasis on the runes because realistically you're only ever going to use runes. You're never going to use the base spell. So I think a lot of the cooler effects were saved for those runes. I think a lot of the rune effects greatly enhance the feel of a lot of abilities. So that's something I'm expecting and looking forward to going forward when they do release the game is the rune effects making skills feel a lot better and their function as well. Like Impale, for example, that's another example of where a rune effect, the first rune effect makes you knock them back. It makes the Impale knock them back and stuns them. And that looks, if you look at Impale itself, it's just basically a strong ranged attack, the base version. But when you actually add that functionality to it where it knocks them back, it's a much more strategic ability, and it feels so much better. Like you find yourself only using Impale against those big scary monsters that are charging at you at full speed. We get Strafe I think it's our only new ability we get to use that we've never seen before. And when I posted the video, I think it was quite mixed. A lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people loved it.
A lot of complaints about the animation.
Yeah. Look, like I said, I think the rune effects probably look a lot better, but in terms of how it looks now, I actually like it, and it feels good when you're using it. Hard to explain. When you're watching a video, it's very different to actually doing it yourself, as you can probably attest to. And it actually...
I've learned that from porn.
Good one. But yeah, it actually, I liked it. It has its own feel. It has its own situational use because, that and rapid fire are virtually identical if you just read what they both do. But with this one, you can actually run away. It's a bit of an escape ability as well. It's a high DPS, low escape ability where you can actually run away from monsters while still doing damage to them, but you're not really running that fast. So basically, Demon Hunter's made to shoot and run, shoot and run, shoot and run, whatever. This complements an in-between medium of that. So instead of just running or attacking, it combines both of them. But you get a little bit of both. So the attack isn't too strong. It's like rapid fire is much more damage than strafe. But the run speed's also about half the run speed. So you're kind of sacrificing a bit of both sides just to do both at the same time. And it's also good at shooting destructibles. It has a prioritization system built into it. So if there's destructibles, it's not going to shoot destructibles instead of monsters. It's going to shoot the monsters first. And if there's no monsters left, then it starts to shoot destructibles, which was the first thing I tested because I thought, hang on, this could be disastrous. If you're wasting all your shots on destructibles, that'll suck. think they've done a very good job at making Strafe still shoot a lot of arrows, but at least have its own flavor and not step on the toes of all the other abilities. So it's that happy medium between escape and damage, and I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Unfortunately, none of us played Monk, Barb, or Witch Doctor enough to make any intelligent comments on those. People were very enthusiastic about the first Barbarian runestone, or a skill rune in comments I saw. Apparently it's to bash, and it makes things explode when you hit them, because the Barbarian had so little of that already. It's nice that he finally has a way to smash corpses into bloody piles across the screen.
Yeah.
But I'll just say the auction house changes. Not much. There's really nothing changed except for the fact that you can look at the gold auction house and the real money auction house are both simultaneously available, and switching between them is exactly what you'd expect it to do. It just switches between them. So not much.
Are you
to say
curious to see how people are going to be selling? Can you sell gold for beta bucks in this point?
Yep, you can. It's still broken because the minimum is $1, and there is no way that 1,000 gold is going to cost $1 in retail. It's going to cost like 10 cents.
Yeah. And you can't sell more than 1,000, or?
You can sell more than 1,000, but you can't, only in increments of 1,000. So you can't.
I see.
Yeah. So
you can't sell for less. I thought the minimum was $1.50 or whatever.
No, that's for the real money auction. Now, see, it's a bit funny the way it works. The actual listing fee is $1.25 for items, but that's not for commodities. For commodities, it's still 15%, but a minimum of $1 each. So I don't know about you, but no commodities are really going to cost more than $1, except for maybe the Inferno stuff. So I think most of that stuff will end up in the gold auction house, which makes sense, which I've written many articles about, which you can see at Diablo3Markets.com.
Yeah, good plug. Do you envision any big changes because there's not going to be runestones for trading or for sale now? Do you think that would have been a big seller, level 7 obsidians or whatever?
If they did the attunement system, yes, it would have been massive. Like the most expensive items would have been runestones, like rank 7 with some awesome affix on it. But now that it's gone, yeah, it's going to be mostly what you'd expect from Diablo 2 style, some crafting materials, pretend they're like perfect skulls, perfect gems and all that stuff. And yeah, a bunch of equipable items, which will mostly be on the real money auction house, whereas commodities will be on the gold auction house primarily.
Yeah, one thing I noticed about these patches is that the patch notes aren't just for the beta content. They mention stuff that's would
outside of it, yeah.
Yeah, be pertinent to Blizzard's internal testing. Like they mentioned that apparently the miner, the collector, and the fence, which are the 3 merchants, are apparently going to be persistent throughout either as the specific characters or as archetypes found in every act.
Okay.
It's interesting.
Well, since they say nothing of any value at this point.
Yeah,
well,
they
was
cost like 1,000 gold.
That was another thing that got changed in this patch. It says vendors will now change their inventories more often throughout the game and will have access to a wider variety of item affixes. And I was surprised because I walked to the miner to sell something and he actually said, "Hey, I have some new stuff. Look at it."
Did I miss this previously, or have those guys had repair for a while?
No, it was previously on the blacksmith.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now the other vendors have repair.
Does the blacksmith still have repair?
No, he does not.
I guess not.
He does not.
I noticed that last night. I was like,
Gee, they're not trying to push people to go to vendors or anything.
Yeah. Well, given the blacksmith does everything now since they dumped the mystic entirely, I guess I figured he had enough on his hands.
Yeah, I mean, vendors could definitely be a more interesting thing. Like, it should be worth checking vendors from time to time to sort of see if they have anything really good. There's also vendors in the wilderness that might have some rare items for sale, that kind of thing.
Okay, it's not so much a theory of what's to come. It's more of an idea that would be very, very cool for the Mystic if it was ever to come back. Imbuing, right? You know how imbuing existed in Diablo 2, where you would put a white item and Chassis would turn it into something cool. And it was a question.
Well, something rare. Whether or not it was cool was debatable.
Yeah. Okay, so what if so at the moment there's a few problems. White items are useless. The Mystic has no rolls, and the gambling system is virtually non-existent. It's sort of built into the blacksmith, which at the moment isn't too random. You're nearly guaranteed good items when you craft stuff at the moment. So what if we put a new imbue system? We'll call it Imbue 2.0. In Imbue 2.0.
And if it sucks, can we call it Imbue 0.2, like Battle.net?
Exactly. Yes, you can. So basically, okay, you get a white item, right? Which used to not have any kind of value at all. You walk up to the Mystic who has been re-implemented. You put the item up on a window, you press imbue. It costs, 1,000 gold, or the cost varies on how good the item is. So if it's like an Inferno white sword, like a runic sword or something, or a rune sword, then it costs, 5,000 gold, right? Now what happens when you hit it? It's like, this is where the gambling system comes, like Geed. So she gives you a random item, right? Now the random item has a 5% chance to be rare, a 94.9% chance to be magical, which is, crap, and a 0.1% chance to be legendary. So say it's a rune sword, you put on a white rune sword, you pay your 5,000 gold. It would have like a 0.1 or 0.01% chance to become Azzure, which is the legendary version. It would have.
You just said that because it's got your name in it.
It's because it's the only one I know is a rune sword. So basically, if you roll the 5%, so if you roll, between 1 and 5 or whatever the internal calculation is, you get random affixes, and it's a rare quality. And yeah, cool system. So it combines the gambling system with the imbuing system, and it makes white items have a purpose again.
So it's a way to spend 1,000 gold to turn a white item into blue reagents.
Well, no, it's a lot more than 1,000 gold. Like if you put something good, so it's a gambling.
So it's 5,000 gold to turn white items into common essences.
Oh, but it could.
It's a tax, like all lotteries. It's a tax on those who are bad at math.
Basically, yes. So it's a gambling system fundamentally, and it gives white items a purpose, and it's a very, very good gold sink, big gold sink.
Yeah, well, we'll see how how gold sinks are needed or not late game.
Well, if they keep increasing gold drops, I think they might need some more.
Would the DPS and the damage be based on the original? Would the DPS and the armor rating be based on the original item, or would they also be rerolled?
Well, they'll be based on the white item. So you know how traditionally, if you've got a white item, it's pretty static in what it's currently got. It's got a small variance.
But like superior or otherwise.
Yeah, no, that would all reset to just base white items. So it'll be like you just found, there's no difference between finding an un-ID rare, for example. If it rolls a rare, it'll be the same sort of thing. So if it's an un-ID, if you drop a rare rune sword, it'll have the same chance of having the same affixes, etc.
That's obviously in the future with, expansion or whatever they put the Mystic back in.
Yeah, I think it's a good expansion feature for the Mystic because it suits her so well.
Okay, guys, I think we've beaten this horse to glue by now. Thanks for your time. We had a little beta chat, and we'll probably have another podcast next week talking about more stuff, and hopefully with some more time spent playing the new characters and trying out the new skills and stuff. This is Flux, and we are online at DiabloPodcast.com, and thanks for listening.
Moo.
Moo. Shouldn't you baa like a sheep? They have sheep in your country, right? Or is that New Zealand?
It's New Zealand.
Where the men are men and the sheep are scared, right?
Yep.